Okay, you're in a meeting and you have a deadline coming up. It's a tight deadline. You've been stuck for days and you know a coworker could help. So in the meeting, you say, I wanted to maybe get your thoughts on something. And then silence. You smile politely, but the meeting moves on. And inside, you're frustrated because you needed help. You tried to ask, but your words felt unsure and your message wasn't understood. It wasn't clear. If you've ever had moments like that, you are absolutely not alone. In fact, many of my students tell me the same thing. I often hear things like, I don't want to sound unprepared. I don't want to come across as weak. I'm afraid they'll know that I don't know what I'm doing. And here's the thing. In some cultures or even some work environments, asking for help can feel risky. It might be misunderstood as a lack of preparation or even a sign that you're not capable. So, how do you navigate that? How do you ask for help or input when you need it, but still sound professional, clear, and confident in English? That's what we're going to focus on today. I'm going to walk you through a 4-step formula that you can use in meetings, emails, and day-to-day conversations at work. Plus, I'll share the exact phrases and real-life examples you need so that you can start using them right away. Toward the end of this lesson, we're also going to talk about what to do when you're in a work environment that does not encourage this kind of communication, because I know that happens. So be sure to stick with me. Now, before we get into that 4-step formula, there's something important I want to talk about first: cultural values, especially the ones that shape communication in English-speaking workplaces. Of course, every company, every team, every individual is different. There's no one size fits all, but there are some patterns that can help you better understand what's expected when you speak up at work in English. For example, many English-speaking workplaces tend to value providing clear, direct requests, using respectful, polite language, avoiding conflict or confrontation, and working together through open dialogue and shared input. What that means is it's often expected and even appreciated when someone asks for help clearly and respectfully. But here's where it gets tricky. If you come from a culture where help is not offered, not requested, or where speaking up could be seen as challenging authority, or if you're in a workplace where things move quickly and there's little time to explain, then you might feel stuck. You might worry about sounding too direct or not direct enough. You might hesitate because you don't want to interrupt or inconvenience someone. And you might struggle to find the balance between sounding confident and still being polite. That's where this structure, this 4-step formula, helps. And here's a visual that might help you too. Think for a moment of asking for help, like handing someone a puzzle piece. You want that piece to fit smoothly into the bigger picture of your project or conversation. But if your request is vague, if it's missing context, if it's too rushed, the puzzle piece doesn't fit. And when it doesn't fit, your listener is left thinking, what does she need from me? Am I supposed to do something? Why is she telling me this? A clear, well-structured request gives your listener a piece that fits. They know exactly what you need, why it matters, and how they can help. That's what we're going to work on next. A 4-step structure that makes your request easy to understand and easy to respond to. So let's start with the first step. Make a clear, specific request. And this is where most people hesitate, especially if you're worried about sounding too direct, or if you've been taught that politeness means being indirect. As a result, you might find yourself saying things like, I just wanted to check on something, or I was hoping to get your thoughts on this. But here's the truth. If your request isn't clear, your listener might not realize that you're even asking for help. They might nod politely and then move on. Not because they don't want to help you, but because the message wasn't clear enough. So the goal in this step is to say exactly what you need help with. Not the backstory, not the context, just the request itself. Here are some natural professional phrases to help you begin. First, I'd like to get your thoughts on. Or, would you have time to? Could you help me with? I need some input on. I'd like to talk through. Or, could I use you as a sounding board? Each of these sentence starters lets your listener know you're not just sharing information, you're asking for input or advice. Let's take a look at an example. Imagine for a moment you're a digital marketing manager and you're preparing a new campaign for the company's social media channels. You might say, I'd like to get your thoughts on the summer campaign we've developed for the company's social media channels. It's clear, it's focused, and it invites a response. Compare that to something more vague like, can someone help me with this? That kind of question puts the responsibility on the listener to figure out what this means. It's not wrong, but it's very easy to ignore, especially in a fast-paced meeting or in a busy email inbox. When your request is clear and specific, people know how to respond, and they're more likely to do so. Once you've made a clear, specific request, the next step is to give a little context, just enough to help the other person understand the situation and give the right kind of support. Once again, this part can be tricky. When we're nervous or unsure about how our message is being received, we often say too much. We might share every single detail, apologize, or repeat ourselves. And when that happens, the request can get lost. So instead of a long explanation, focus on just one or two pieces of information that help the other person understand what's happening right now. For example, you might start with, I'm facing a challenge with. Right now, I'm working on. I've already tried. I must finish this by. Specifically, I need help with. Now, to see this in action, let's go back to our earlier scenario. Again, you're a digital marketing manager asking for input on your summer campaign. Here's how you could follow that initial request with helpful context. I'm facing a challenge with making the messaging feel consistent across platforms. We've got strong visuals, but the tone feels different in each version, and I'd love your input on that. Notice how that is clear and focused. You're not giving the full project history. You're simply helping the other person tune in to what matters most right now. That's the goal in step 2. Give just enough context so your listener can offer useful, relevant input. Once you've made your clear request and added helpful context, then it's time to explain why you're asking this specific person or group for help. This is where you create connection. When someone understands how they can help and why their input matters, they're more likely to engage. You're also showing that you value their experience and expertise, and that builds trust. So here are a few professional ways to do that. First, your experience with X. Here you could highlight a specific project would be valuable here. Or since you've handled similar situations before, your perspective would help us consider. Your background in X would be helpful with. Or you're familiar with X, which ties directly to this challenge. Again, let's continue with the same scenario. You've already asked for input on the summer campaign, and you've shared that the messaging feels inconsistent across platforms. So now, here's how you could explain why you're asking your colleague for support. Your background in brand strategy and your work on last year's campaign would really be helpful here. It's a simple addition, but it does two important things. First, it shows that you've thought carefully about who to ask for help. And second, it reinforces that this isn't just about getting help, it's about collaboration and moving the project forward. This step is especially helpful when you're asking someone more senior, because it doesn't just ask for their time, it acknowledges their expertise. And that makes the request feel professional, thoughtful, and well placed. The final step here is to make your request actionable. This is where you clarify when you need support, what happens next, and how you'll follow up. It shows that you're organized, respectful of time, and ready to move forward. Many English learners skip this part, either because they're unsure of how to say it or they worry about asking for too much. But leaving your request open-ended can lead to confusion or no response at all. So here are a few simple professional ways to share these next steps. First, I'd love to have your feedback by, or if I send this over today, could we discuss it tomorrow? Could we add this to next week's agenda? I'll update the draft after our conversation and send it for final review. I'll follow up with you by the end of the week. So now let's put the full structure together with one more example. This time, imagine you're preparing a timeline for a new customer service policy. You need a colleague to review it before implementation. Here's how your request could sound. Would you have some time to review the timeline for our new customer service policy? The policy change goes in effect next Friday, so I need to finalize everything this week. I know that you've implemented similar changes before, and I'd really value your input. If I could send you the draft this afternoon, could we schedule 20 minutes to talk this through before Thursday? This request is clear, it's respectful, and it gives the other person everything they need to say yes and feel good about it. That's the power of this 4-step formula. It doesn't just help you ask for help. It helps you do it with clarity, professionalism, and confidence. Now, what if your workplace doesn't respond well to these kinds of requests? What if asking for help is seen as a weakness or something you should avoid? This does happen. And if that's your situation, I want you to know that it is absolutely not your fault and you're not doing anything wrong. In fact, you can do everything right. Ask clearly, respectfully, and professionally, and still get resistance if the culture around you is rigid, competitive, or unclear about expectations. So what can you do? When you're in an environment like this, focus on being strategic. You can still ask for help, but you might need to reframe your request to emphasize outcomes, alignment, or efficiency. For example, instead of saying, I'm stuck and I need help, you might say, I want to make sure we're aligned before moving forward. Would you be open to giving me a quick review? Or, I'd like to check in to ensure we're meeting expectations. Could we take 15 minutes to go over this together? These kinds of requests sound proactive. They focus on shared goals, and they still open the door to the support you need without sounding uncertain or exposed. Now, if this is something you're dealing with regularly, especially with a difficult or unapproachable manager, I've created a full lesson that can help. It's called How to Deal with a Difficult Boss in English. And in that video, I walk you through exactly how to protect your confidence and communicate effectively, even in challenging situations. I'll leave a link to that video below so you can watch it next. You now have a 4-step structure to help you ask for help or input clearly, confidently, and professionally in English. Let's do a quick review. Step 1 is to make a clear, specific request. Step 2, share relevant information or context. Step 3, explain how others can contribute. And step 4, share next steps and follow up. This structure works in meetings, in emails, and in one-on-one conversations. It helps you speak up even when you're unsure. It helps you move forward even when you feel stuck. And most importantly, it helps you do it in a way that feels professional and true to who you are. Now, if this lesson was helpful, I'd love to hear from you. I want you to think about a time when you needed help at work. What did you say at that time? And what could you say next time based on what you've learned here? Share it with me in the comments down below. And don't forget, if you often find yourself unsure of how to communicate with a manager who's hard to reach, overly critical, or unclear, I recommend watching my lesson on how to deal with a difficult boss. With that, thank you so much for joining me today. And as always, if you found this lesson helpful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up here on YouTube and subscribe so you never miss one of my lessons. I'll see you next time.